Hey, everybody, we're live. Joe. Woo! Joe, the new executive director of Tennessee Songwriters Association, wanted to speak with you guys tonight about real country music on radio. It's something that Tennessee Songwriters Association started about 7 years ago, and we've been trying to have music take us seriously, because other genres of music, like heavy metal, you have hair metal, you have death metal, you have screamo metal, you have all kinds of metal. You have pop, and then you have pop this and pop that. But in country music, there was only ever one chart and one award for country music. But country music isn't just country music anymore. It's not traditional country music anymore. It's country music, pop country, and all kinds of things, which is all great, but they shouldn't be competing against each other because it's apples and oranges. So we've been trying to do that. Now we've just learned that the Grammys are splitting the awards for traditional and the other kind of country music, pop country music, contemporary country, as I believe what they're calling it. But so what we actually look at that as a huge win on our end, and we want to talk about that and what that means for real country music on radio. So I actually brought in two guests to run the meeting. I'm going to step aside here, and I'm going to introduce, and then we actually have a special guest that we're going to introduce in a minute, but I'm going to introduce, everybody knows, Mr. Paul Castoe and award-winning songwriter, Danny Wells.
Right. All right, thank you, Joe. Which one's which? I'm me and he's him.
All right.
Right?
Absolutely.
Or is it the other way? It might be the other way. I don't remember. So anyway, thank you, Joe. And absolutely.
Yeah.
So as a little bit of a refresher, thanks y'all for coming, by the way. You thought you got rid of me, didn't you? But it's been a month.
No, we're glad we did.
No, we're good. No, thank you guys. I love y'all. And buddy, thank you for coming too.
My pleasure.
Yeah, like Joe said, I was elected 7 years ago to this position, and I thought, well, what's the biggest thing that I can do, and I can use TSAI to help with, to help songwriters. And even as far back as that, we all knew what country radio was like, and we knew what was on country radio. We knew the arguments about, well, that's country, or that's not country, or this should be on the radio, this shouldn't be on the radio. And it was always an either or sort of a thing. And I looked at it going, obviously people like this pop country. I don't, and a lot of us don't, but somebody does, right? And we understand the fact that the people control radio are in New York and LA, and they don't like country music and all of that, and that's fine. And the evolution, it happened, and it was a perfect time for it. But if you remember when Ken Burns did that thing about country music, the history of country music, and you could just see it evolve, right? I mean, this became country, and the argument of, well, the Ernest Tubb people said, well, this is country, but Merle Haggard isn't country. Merle Haggard's a folk guy from California. And now Merle Haggard is country and traditional country. In fact, very traditional country. And so just watching that evolve, and it was like layers of an onion just piling up, piling up, piling up. And it just gets to the point, like Joe said, it gets to the point where it can't all be on the same radio station. And everybody doesn't like all of it. I mean, Bob Wills comes along, and Bob Wills is not country. Well, now he is country. And people that were rejected as country are now bell cows, right? For Hey, Richard. So you have all of that going on, and you just see all this happening. And my view is from the radio perspective, because songwriters still get paid when we get something on the radio, right? We don't get paid for much of anything else. So I view it as like a three-legged stool, and I believe strongly, if you look at anything important in this world, there's a Father, Son, and Holy Ghost aspect to everything. And the Grammys aspect of it is the awards aspect, and that's a big piece of news for us. So that part of it has to happen. Awards have to be geared for pop country and traditional country, and then a Billboard chart has to be separated, and then a radio format has to be separated. There's all three of those things need to happen. And again, I've approached it and viewed it and pushed it from the radio standpoint. And yes, we trademarked the phrase real country music on radio. And if you go on the TSAI website and you scroll down on that homepage, there's a gallery. I don't know if any of y'all have leafed through that, but I had my picture taken with an awful lot of very cool people holding this wristband up. This wristband says Real Country Music on Radio, and I'll give you a couple of them. Anybody else want one? Anybody else got any? You want one? All right. There's a couple. There's
Drop them
one.
off.
There's one. So this is a fundraiser. Obviously, there you go, Joe. So and you can order these on the TSAI website, and it's a fundraiser. Any money goes to Tennessee Songwriters Association. But it's like everything else. You got to have a catchphrase, right? So my view of a catchphrase was Real Country Music on Radio, in the sense that it should all be on the radio. I'm not going to argue about whether Morgan Wallen should be on the radio or that's country music or not, or Dan and Shay is country music or not. Some people like it. It's on country radio. Deal with it. But so should traditional country, and not on the same radio station, because honestly, if you're going to have a radio station and a radio format that is going to play both of those, I'm going to turn it off. As soon as that snap track clap thing starts happening, I'm turning it off. As soon as any of that happens, I don't want to hear it. So I think that it doesn't really serve the purpose for them to both try to be on the radio on the same radio station, because somebody's going to turn one off and the other person's going to turn the other one off. And that's not helping radio at all. And we both know that there's plenty of room for both. There's plenty of music being made. There's plenty of songs being written. There's plenty of artists out there doing both. And there's plenty of listeners that want to hear one or the other, but not both. And then advertisers want to reach a large group of people they're not reaching, because those people are not listening to the radio at all. And they're listening to Willie's Roadhouse or a Spotify playlist or this or that. But songwriters aren't getting paid for any of that. So that's why I've been pushing it. Radio needs to be a big part of the solution. And we can all sit here and go, well, nobody listens to radio anymore. Well, is that a chicken or an egg? Are you not listening to radio because there's nothing on radio you want to hear? I propose that is the answer. So if radio stations could choose which format, complete with reporting stations, so we got paid, and any decent-sized town would have room for both. They would have a traditional country radio station, and it could play oldies, right? And then they could have the pop country. Now, I realize that the Grammys are approaching this like with the word contemporary, like a lot of people use. But in my mind, contemporary country means nothing. Merle Haggard was contemporary country, right? Contemporary means whatever's happening now. And it's all happening now, right? Rhonda Vincent's new single could be on a traditional country radio station, right? Turnpike Troubadour's new single could be on, right? Stuff that you're writing is going to likely be traditional and it could chart. And all of these, Cody Jinks, Cody Johnson, I mean, the list goes on. There's so many phenomenal, really good, Zach Top, there's a bunch of people that are doing good traditional country, and it should be on the radio. It should be easier to find. Songwriters should be getting paid for it. And if all that was happening, guys, we would get more cuts and we would get paid. I mean, and that's my view as I'm approaching this from the radio standpoint. There's three aspects. The Grammys is taking a big, big step. Because like I said, what they're going to have next year is a traditional country album of the year. And they're going to call it a contemporary, which is pop, country album of the year. Both. They're making room for both because they recognize there's a need and there's an audience, and they both deserve winning something. When I was elected, I changed how we did our awards here at TSAI because I want the songs to win. I want the best songs to rise to the top, and I thought that both of those genres deserve to win. There should be a traditional country song of the year, and there should be. So that'll be the next thing. We have some input here, obviously.
Okay,
Got some. I can't read it, so
introduce him.
Oh well, everybody knows Danny, right? You know Danny Wells. Thank you for joining us at the award show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you, guys.
So I've said my little
honor.
piece. I just kind of lay a little groundwork of why we're here and what's going on tonight. And so, what's your thoughts, man?
Mine will be a little piece. I grew up on Johnny Cash and Merle Haggard and real country, and I love it. And obviously, when things changed in America, And we started having rock and roll country music with Brooks and Dunn, and R&B country music with Rascal Flatts, and just all those different kinds of country music. A lot of people complained, but actually it was just taking the salt shaker in the middle of the table and just creating a bigger part of country music that really pull people. I mean, with Beyonce coming and winning, even that, people might not like it, but it's created this award. And but ultimately what it's going to do is allow recognition of more traditional people, and it's going to allow more money, because there'll be, like you said, different. They're already doing it on streaming radio. It's
all been there the whole time.
It's just going to be
traditional country never went away.
Radio,
right? I mean,
right. So you could have different, and you're, like you said, you're having more sponsors, get involved in radio, and it's a win-win-win all the way around, because the truth is everybody's a songwriter everywhere you go, right?
And that's really,
I mean, it's just,
and in Austin too.
Yeah. So,
speaking of, don't we have another guest?
We do. So to join in on this conversation, I don't know how many of you are familiar with a website and an organization called Saving Country Music. If you are, I hope you look it up. Kyle Coronis is joining us tonight, so thank you, Kyle. He's in Austin, so he's streaming in on the side. Y'all are familiar with this.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us, Kyle. So, Kyle, tell us a little bit about your perspective on this.
Well, so I agree with everything you said about country radio, and that's one of the reasons I'm excited about this split of the country categories with the Grammy Awards, because I think this could be potentially the first, the first spark to really get people thinking about country music from a different perspective. You said it. The person that started off said it perfect. Like, when I was growing up, you would listen. There was a modern rock station, and then there was a classic rock station. In fact, the classic rock station usually was bigger than the modern rock station. You had all the classic rock people, the Led Zeppelins and the Pink Floyds, and people would listen to that, or you could listen to the modern rock station. And then like in the 90s and 2000s, then you had alternative, which was sort of like which kind of gave way to grunge music and that kind of thing. So you had, as the landscape in rock music evolved, you had different formats, different radio formats. And, they also had different magazines that would cater to these different places, these different types of genres. And you'd have, and like the Grammys has a best heavy metal category, and they also have a best rock category. They don't have every single subgenre, but they've got those categories. And they've even got traditional and contemporary categories for things like blues. Like the blues category has contemporary blues and traditional blues. And so it seemed like the perfect thing that needed to happen for the Grammys to be one of the organizations, to be one of the first to recognize that traditional country and contemporary country are two completely different things. Now, that said, one of the big splits here, so first off, I can speak from personal experience. I think a lot of people thought that this came about from the Grammys after the big Beyonce win. I don't think that's the case. In fact, Harvey Mason, who's the main guy of the Grammys, has tried to reiterate this. This has been years in the making. I was first involved in trying to make this happen in 2019. And so, this has been many years of trying to convince the Grammy organization that this is a viable thing to do. And it wasn't a response to Beyonce or anything specifically. I do think probably the fact that this last Grammy season, there were so many nominations and awards going out to artists that are not necessarily indigenous to country, like Beyonce, like Post Malone, like Miley Cyrus and all these other names, that probably aided the fact that they decided to do this year. But this has been a long time coming. And in fact, if you
Definitely been boiling up.
yeah, if you go back a few years, there used to be a Western Swing Grammy category. There used to be a Best Country Instrumental category. Marty Stewart won it, I think, in like 2012. And so one of the, there were more sort of traditional categories that existed. The Grammys still have a Best Bluegrass Album category. And a lot of this stuff, though people are focusing a lot on like the split between traditional country and contemporary country, in reality, Americana plays a huge role in this because the Grammys have a whole category they call the American Roots category. And so that includes a Best Folk Album, that includes a Best Bluegrass Album, that includes a bunch of song categories. They call them American Roots Song, which categorizes like all the bluegrass, folk, and they have a Best Americana Album. And so a lot of the traditional country albums that were being submitted to the Grammys were actually going to Americana. They weren't going into country because the people that were making these traditional country albums, they didn't want to be associated with what was being put in best country album, or they just thought that Americana was the place that they needed to be. And so they that's where a lot of these albums ended up going. So I think that it was a very wise decision by the Grammys to do this. One thing I want to say, because it's very, very important for the traditional country music community to understand, this category, this new traditional country album category, should not be taken for granted. If you are an artist and you created a traditional country album, if you're a songwriter and you contributed to a traditional country album, make sure that you reach out to those performers. Make sure that they know that this new category exists, and encourage them to submit their album to the Grammy Awards for this cycle. It's very, very important because one of the reasons, or one of the ways that the Grammys decide when they're going to make a new category or when they're going to take a category away is how many submissions they're getting. So the Grammys, I'm not sure exactly what the number is, but it's probably like they want to see about 100 submissions to each category to keep it healthy. And believe it or not, the country album category, without splitting it, was already kind of in an unhealthy level. They would only get like maybe 75, 80 submissions each year, whereas Best Americana Album would have like something like almost 400.
Right.
So, and one of the reasons for that, which is very interesting, is that the major labels in Nashville are not submitting their entire catalogs. So what would happen, like if you had a Americana label, like let's say 30 Tigers or New West or Rounder Records, they're submitting their whole catalog to the Grammy Awards. That's just the way they are. They're not showing any preferential treatment to one artist or another. But when you had major labels, they'll only submit maybe 2 or 3 of their albums to the Grammys because they don't want these other albums to compete. And guess what? Guess who gets left out of that process? Traditional country artists. So like Scotty McCreery, Josh Turner, Reba McEntire. Last year, they put out country albums and they didn't even get submitted to the Grammy Awards. So we need to make sure, like as a traditional country music community, that this year, anyone and everyone who released a traditional country album, submit that to the Grammys. And this also includes songs. Like, even though this just starts with a traditional country album category and it doesn't include song categories, songs should be submitted too, especially if they're traditional country. So that way in the coming years, we can say, hey, look at all these traditional country songs that are also being submitted. Let's have a traditional country, best traditional country song and best traditional country performance category. So hopefully that happens in the future. But this is the Grammys is just one small part of the whole music process. But my hope is that this inspires us to start the whole industry to start thinking about country music as different subgenres of country. We have bluegrass, you have Americana, and let's have traditional country, and let's have contemporary country.
I thank you. That's an expert analysis, because from an award standpoint, you do want to keep those sort of genres separate. Americana music is Americana. Bluegrass is bluegrass. I mean, you'll have bluegrass aficionados saying that's not bluegrass. It has drums in it. So I mean, I understand that the purists and the truists want to keep those genres alive, and they should have awards. And I love that there is a split and a difference. Obviously, the album category constitutes a collection of songs. So it's going to be an obvious natural thing for the songs to have to separate, because you'll have an artist like a Luke Combs or someone who will have some of both on an album. And then obviously he does traditional country songs, and those should chart and do well on a traditional country chart. And he have a pop contemporary song that will chart and do well on that chart. Those are radio and Billboard charts. And that is going to be the obvious thing that has to split, because people, I've been talking about this for a long time, you've been talking about it for a long time. People say, well, who decides, right? Well, some of that stuff is kind of gray, right? I know Lady Wilson may have something that's a little, maybe in a May chart, do well on both of those charts. Well, good. But I think ultimately what belongs on a chart and on a radio format is as much what doesn't belong. I mean, I'm a snow skier. Anybody here a snow skier? Y'all snow ski? So when you go to a snow ski place in a ski resort, you'll have a bunny hill, and then you'll have the blue intermediate. It's the same hill. And then they'll have a black diamond where they'll put some moguls on it to make it real hard for us. But it's as much about separating the skiers. So this is as much about what is on the chart as what isn't on the chart. So, getting back to on a radio format, you want to know that you can turn on that radio station and probably like everything, and not have to be turning it off when what you don't like comes on. And that's why when I look at it from a radio format, a pop contemporary, they call it contemporary, but like I say, contemporary doesn't mean anything, but a pop country chart with a radio format, pretty much what we have now, is fine. You like that? Listen to it. And if you happen to like that and you happen to like traditional, then listen to the other radio station once in a while. Do what you want to do. There's nobody saying you can't, right? So, but just let that be where it is and let the cream rise to the top. So somebody like a Luke Combs will have two songs. He could have a number one on both charts. Good for him, and good for the listeners who want to hear it, and good for the advertisers who want to reach that. Because if you think about advertising in another format or another aspect to that format, is if you're Chevy trucks or Coca-Cola or Carnival Cruises or Levi jeans or Maybelline or whatever it is you're advertising, you sort of need to gear the commercial a little bit, right? You can't do this hip-hoppy kind of commercial and then expect the traditional radio station to play that commercial, right? So now the advertisers need to know and gear their advertising. They will steer it. The background music and the whole approach will be different. Same with television and same with a lot of things. So, radio commercials are a big part of what makes radio work. It's almost all of what makes radio work. So those advertisers need to know how to do those commercials. And if there is a absolute, this is a pop radio station format, this is a traditional radio station format, then they can gear the commercials accordingly and do a much better job reaching their audience. And they want to. I've talked to companies. Kyle, you've talked to companies. They want to be able to reach those audiences, and they're missing out. I have these conversations with people, and they say, well, why is country radio the way it is? And that people say, well, it's because of the money. I know. And you're ignoring half of it. There's not enough money in this business to be ignoring half of it anymore. right?
Yeah, I say this all the time. Like when you have it can't be emphasized enough the difference, sort of the cultural difference between traditional country listeners and contemporary country listeners. So, if you're a traditional country listener, you're more likely to listen, to be open and inviting to like listen to rock music or classic rock music or even like hip hop music as what it is, more so than you're willing to listen to those influences come through country songs. Like when you hear a country song that's clearly just obviously a hip hop song that's being pushed to the country market, you're just repulsed by that. You're tuning out. It's game over. And so there's no, so back like in so I think it was about 2014, Cumulus Radio did actually try to split these formats, tried to split the radio formats. It was Lou Dickey was the CEO, and he had this whole idea, and it started. He called it Nash Icon, and Nash Icon was supposed to be. He was gonna split the radio. He was like, well, we're gonna have contemporary country radio, and then we're gonna have this Nash Icon thing, and then we're even gonna have like a Nash Classic, which is gonna be like super old, like an oldies station or something. And the problem with that was and they even had a few of these Nash Icon stations that got populated. But the problem was, it's like, sure, they would have more like traditional older country music playing on these stations, but then they would also mix in Florida Georgia Line or Sam Hunt or, one of these like super duper contemporary things. And so those consumers were out. Like it just didn't work because you could have a radio station that has that's playing the classics, right? The country gold, the Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings and Merle Haggard, and mix in some songs like off of Luke Combs' new Fathers and Sons album that has like some traditional country songs on there. Mm-hmm. And even if those more traditional country listeners aren't huge Luke Combs fans, they're not going to be repulsed by those songs coming onto their format. They're going to be like, oh, well, I don't love Luke Combs, but this is a pretty good song. And they may say that about Lainey Wilson. They may say that about other artists that sort of work in more rootsy sounds in contemporary country. But as soon as you pop off with, a Sam Hunt song, it's over. Or Walker Hayes or one of these guys, they're just not going to listen anymore. And so that's why a split in the country format is just, to me, it's so obvious. And we're creating these unnecessary conflicts within the country music community. Like, I don't want to hate someone just because they like a different type of, because they like Sam Hunt or Florida Georgia Line, like, often you meet these people, they're fine people, but it's like you're creating all this conflict and this friction by trying to keep this family together that doesn't want to be together, And so if to me, it's so obvious what needs to happen here.
Yeah, I agree. It's been obvious to me for a long time. I mean, and when you look at things like record sales, you look at concert attendance, butts in the seats is still a big measurable thing, and the traditional people are doing just as well. You look at, Cody Jinks and Cody Johnson were on tour together. They sold Bridgestone out 3 times or something in a row. And those people are doing really, really well on the road. And again, as a songwriter, that's where our songs have to go. And again, separating them is the entire point. And we were all hoping when Scott and Cumulus did all that they would use the Nash Icon radio format to play oldies, because that will draw people back to radio, but then break the new traditional artist and not, like you said, just reach for the top of this typical top 40 of whatever was going on at that point. But they didn't do it. And so, like you said, it just didn't work. But had they been doing that and breaking Cody Jinks' new single, Cody Johnson's new single, Turnpike Troubadours, and just all these people, Brandy Carlisle, and just a whole slew of people that are doing really well with traditional country, had they been doing that to break those new singles, then there would be a new, and it would have evolved immediately and that life would have just grown, the way it's supposed to grow. And then the listeners could listen, and you could turn into one or tune into one, tune into the other. When you're writing with folks today, I mean, you gear for something. How much of an opportunity is 48 hours a day of country music going to do for your career? I mean, you'll be able to sit there and say, well, where are we aiming this for? Should it be on this chart or that chart? Because now there'll be that chart, right?
Very specific.
I mean, that's awesome opportunities for all of us. I mean, I mean, you're still writing. It's not like
country music. That's why we moved here, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
yeah, I think the chart issue is a really interesting one too, right? Because people are like, well, why is Shabuzi on the same chart as George Strait and these kinds of things? And it used to be that Billboard was, I wouldn't say great, but it was decent at saying, okay, this really isn't country. I mean, it was sort of infamously decided that Lil Nas X's Country Road Anthem, or whatever that was called, 2018 or so, they took that off the charts. They were like, look, this is it's too much hip hop. It's too much pop. It doesn't belong here. And so there was a time, and in very recent memory, when Billboard was kind of holding the line a little bit. That is completely gone now. It doesn't matter if you call something country, if you label the metadata of a song or an album as country, Billboard's going to recognize it. They're not going to curate it. They're not going to question it. And everything is getting put on this same chart. And as the Grammys recognized, what ends up happening when you have these massive pop stars coming into country is it's overshadowing, it's pushing away the artists that have been doing this for decades. This is, you think of the little girls and the little boys that grew up wanting to be country stars and dedicated their lives to it, going to little singing competitions, going to fiddle competitions, participating in writers' rounds, and like learning the craft for years and decades before they ever got any kind of shot. That finally here, maybe they get to the big time. And now all of a sudden they're having to compete with Beyonce and Post Malone and all these massive millionaires who have these huge fan bases already, and they're getting pushed down those charts. And we know that the organizations like Billboard have the capacity to make new charts because they did that for folk Americana. Folk Americana has their own chart. Bluegrass has its own chart. There's even a radio chart so I'm based here in Austin. There's a Texas radio chart that Billboard populates each week. And there's a Texas radio format, and they screen those different radio stations and put a chart out for it. And that way, if you're a Texas music artist, if you're a Texas songwriter, that's a big deal trying to get on the Texas charts. Now, obviously, the audience for the Texas charts is significantly smaller than it is for the big mainstream country chart, but it's not nothing. It's recognition. It's like, we're getting
a pretty big market.
And that's what has seeded artists like Cody Johnson, came from that. Parker McCollum. These artists started in Texas, built something here, and then became big enough to where they could move to Nashville and be part of the big mainstream system. Another thing that I think is really important to this discussion, and specific with radio, and I have some decent insight because, like I said, I'm in Texas, so I have a little bit of a different perspective on this, is the majority of those Texas radio stations are here in Texas and in Oklahoma. So you have Texas and Red Dirt. Well, in the surrounding states like Kansas and Missouri and Arkansas, eastern Colorado, even up to Nebraska, and even up to like Wisconsin, you have a lot of radio stations that play a lot of the Texas Red Dirt stuff, but they're actually discouraged from playing too much of it, because as soon as you play too much of that sort of regional radio, you will get kicked off the charting panels that cover all the country music. All of a sudden we'll decide, oh, you're a Red Dirt station now, or you're a Texas country station now. You're no longer a mainstream country station. And so they'll kick you off the media-based panel or one of these radio panels that does all the charting. And so there's a perverse incentive from a lot of these radio stations. And this deals with like traditional country and contemporary country too. So if you start playing a lot of country gold titles, like older country music, or even newer country artists that are making more traditional country, like you said, like new artists that are making traditional country, if you start playing a lot of that music, they will kick you off the panels of how they aggregate those charts. And so there's a perverse incentive to continue to play basically the same contemporary country music that every other station is playing. And so this is how we've created this homogeneous, like this homogeneous radio format that it sounds like no matter where you go in the country, whether you're in Nashville or you're in Texas or you're in California or you're in Idaho, you turn on the country radio station, you're probably going to hear the same 40 songs played over and over. And that's because the regional dialects have been bled out by the nationalization of the radio format. And so that's one of the reasons that people are so timid to add some of these like new traditionalists or add some of the old traditional country songs back to their playlists.
Yeah, it's confusing when I try to relate this from a Billboard standpoint to really the way Billboard created the original top 40 in 1958. At that point, there were three primary charts. There was the Hillbilly chart, and there was the Black basically music chart. It became R&B later, but they had to have a better name for it. And then the existing pop chart, which would have had Andy Williams and people like that on it. So those three charts existed, and I believe that all of the charts, like you said, all the Grammy awards and all those charts, those viable styles of music should exist, and they should still be rewarded, and they should still have their own chart. But I think that Billboard should take the best of all of them and create kind of a traditional top 40 that would be traditional country and the best of traditional bluegrass and folk and Americana, and let those top hit songs all chart together on a traditional country chart, because that listener's not going to turn it off. That's, like you said, the dividing line, the continental divide here is hip hop. And once it's hip hop, it's no. If it's not hip hop, it's fine, right? So if it's got some fiddles and like I said, Ron DeVince's new single or anybody like that, anything that's outside of Jim Lauderdale puts out something, right? All these things that are all of these other formats, these are great, truest genres, and they should stay and they should exist and they should have their own chart and they should go. But combined together, this is a viable block of music. And that's a bunch of listeners who are going to want to listen to that and not turn that radio station off. And there have always been crossover artists. There's always been a Glenn Campbell or a Kenny Rogers or somebody that was kind of pop, but not so pop that it was offensive. The stuff that's going on now is offensive to me and a lot of us, right? And I mean, bordering satanic offensive. So I am not going to suffer through it. It's just not going to happen. So I think that's what my radio proposal has been, like what you're proposing to the Grammys, and they finally listened, is the fact that there's just too much music to be in any one category. And they need to be awarded properly. Radio should be, having it formatted properly, complete with reporting stations and everything, so that those new artists can go to the top. And it's just all three of these things. Radio needs to do it, Billboard needs to do it, and all the awards, CMAs, ACMs, and everybody else should be following. And then when you're writing, you've got artists that maybe would write for one station and then write something else for another station. So. I mean, there's too much music to be on any one radio format, too much music to be in any one awards. I love that you've done this and been able to push it. I mean, you should be taking a lot of credit for getting the Grammys to do this, man. I think.
Well, yeah. I mean, and as far as like the songs things goes, you hear from a lot of songwriters, and you hear from a lot of like traditional country artists who talk about how many great traditional country songs are out there right now, but that are just like sitting on the shelf because they're not getting, there's just not like the avenue. There's not those artists that can get, that for them to cut, and we know about like the implosion. When I first started this in 2008, I came in right when so many, it used to be that there were 10,000 professional songwriters or whatever, people that were actively working. And now there's like maybe 100. It's like you see the same names over and over again that get the cuts. And so if you had those traditional country artists, they were getting played on the radio, because you make a great point about how the royalties, how the money works for songwriting is so much more lucrative with radio. And you have all these people complaining about, well, streaming doesn't pay off as much. And that's true. But it's like, well, what are you going to do about it? Like people love to stream music. And one of the reasons they're streaming so much music is because there's not a radio station that they feel like is playing to what they want to listen to. But radio still is a great, it's a great discovery mechanism for new songs. The interpersonal nature of a DJ, you feel like you're listening, you're in someone's living room and they're playing you records, they're recommending you things. It's just the whole nationalization of playlists, the taking away of live DJs, the format where it's like, people are coming in and they're just doing voiceovers for 15 minutes for a 3-hour show, as opposed to actually being live in a studio. All of these things to me are taking away the great thing about radio, and I think traditional country could be a great way to reintegrate all of these like live, in person, real DJs, curating a play, like call-in shows where people like, hey, request lines, like all of these things could be the way to save radio. The way to save country radio, I think, is to reintegrate all of these kinds of traditional things. It's funny because, people say that radio is dying, and I think unfortunately that's true. But like people said that vinyl was going to die, right? Like vinyl, who wants to listen to old vinyl records? That's of the past. Now, vinyl is one of the biggest formats coming back, right? And the reason that it's coming back is because it's real. People can hold it in their hands. They like looking at the covers. They can put it on, and like putting a record on the turntable feels, it's almost like a fire or something, or like you're cooking a big stew pot. It's like there's something hearthy about it. And so I think radio, if radio would get back to that, I think radio could become a fashionable thing again. I think it could find, once it finds its bottom, that could be the way to build it back up. And I think it could do that with more so with traditional country songs than it could with contemporary, because contemporary country songs, God bless them, but they're they're earworms, right? It's like you listen in your commute. It's just get your toe tapping and you move on. Traditional country music speaks to the heart. It's like it speaks to the soul. You listen, you don't just hear it, you listen to it, you ingest it. It becomes part of it,
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And there's a lot of reasons about buying music. Traditional country would probably create more mechanicals for us as writers, because more people would buy those, whether it was on vinyl or something else. Because like you said, I mean, people, if you're going to spend money for something, you want to hold it in your hand. I mean, downloading WAV files and things are just files that disappear. Is that my phone going? I thought I turned it off. But I mean, to spend money for a WAV file that that could just disappear is, that's why people don't want to spend any money on it. But vinyl is a possibility, and I hadn't really thought about that, but that would potentially create more mechanicals for all of us. But it's a format that all of these things need to happen. This is a phenomenal step that the Grammys are taking, and obviously Song of the Year would be just the no-brainer aspect after that. But I'm excited to see what the ACMs and the CMAs are going to do. Nashville's very much about, I need one of those, right? So and then like you said, the artists can be in both. They can do songs of both. There are plenty that currently do. I think some of the artists, if there was a radio Billboard chart and a radio format, both of those things would need to happen. Then some of these artists would absolutely do traditional songs because they could chart. I mean, guys, we had a room full of songwriters here. How many times have you pitched a song to a song plugger and had them say, "Well, that's a really good song. I just don't know what to do with it." Well, now they do. So, if radio opened that door and if the awards were all there for everybody, then the labels would sign somebody and maybe that would be an exclusive artist. Maybe not. It doesn't matter, but if the songs could get written and the songs had an end zone to be scoring in, then we would all be doing it, and there would be that vehicle's there would be an avenue, and the pluggers would listen to the songs, they would pick up more songs, the labels would sign artists for that. It just all grows. So this is a I see this as, that what was that picture where that little flower was starting to grow out of the crack in the concrete. That's kind of what I see with this. So it's just I just keep growing. It just keeps going. What do you guys think? I mean, we've been doing all the talking here. I've been doing most of it, and Kyle's been awesome, man. But so, anybody got any opinions? What do you think?
I think the way that music's been changing, it's definitely what Kyle was saying, been leading toward this. I've found more traditional leaning country artists that are zooming right now more recently. Specifically, one I'm listening to on repeat is Caitlin Butts.
Yes.
It's as traditional as it gets. Her lyrics are contemporary, but I mean, her whole show, I mean, from head to toe, she says traditional. She's headed there. She's headed to the top of those charts, and I think it just leaves room for so many more who just respect the genre.
Yeah. It's you say lyrics are contemporary, but I mean, music clearly is going to be pop or traditional, but I mean, lyrics, they should be appealing to everybody, and on a more, like, so they've always appealed to a more emotional level, real stories that apply and everybody can relate to. I mean, if you can only sing about a dirt road and a pickup truck so many times,
Yeah.
So
the Grammys are going to really highlight the traditional country because there's literally 1,000 Grammy songs. I mean Grammy like Russian song, Romanian song.
And it doesn't all make television, but if it can make television, I think the TV ratings for some of these things would go back up too. Because I got to tell you, I haven't watched an award show in at least 10 years. I mean, there's nothing for me to watch. I'm not interested. Even if there was, I'm not going to sit through the other crap to listen to it. So, I mean, that'll help too. And that may actually, Kyle, is that in any aspect of it? I mean, are they actually looking at this from a TV rating standpoint?
So he is right. There are a lot of Grammy categories. There's not 1,000, but I think there's around 100, or there's like 94, 96 or something around there. So there are a lot of Grammy categories. I don't know that this would make it on television. It might. There's no reason it wouldn't if it was a big artist. Like, imagine if George Strait won it. They probably would put that on. And George Strait was there, and George Strait was going to perform a song. I bet they would put that on television because George Strait is a huge draw. Like you were talking about before, George Strait just had down here in Texas at College Station, he did the largest ticketed event, single performance event in North American history last year in 2024. So, I mean, he is, George Strait is a stadium draw artist, and that's how big traditional country is. And the idea that it's sort of othered in the country community is kind of crazy, and so there seems like, sure, I think someone mentioned Caitlin Butts. I think some of the biggest, fastest rising artists right now in country music and in music in general are traditional country artists. Caitlin Butts, Zach Top, these artists are
You just did a review for a young lady too, and I just read it the other day, and I wasn't familiar with her, but it was an excellent album. Do you remember who that was? Is a younger blonde girl from Texas?
maybe Catherine Legendre.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce her last name?
Legendre is how I think you say it. Legendre or Legendre. But she's great. I mean,
She is great, guys. Check this album out. It was an awesome record.
But
You do
another
amazing. You guys follow him, man. He does great album reviews, and will turn you on to some amazing music.
Also,
Yeah.
maybe unpopular opinion, but I would not discredit Post Malone from coming back with his second country album and taking the traditional country category to popularity. Because as soon as they announced that, I saw a post about Posty saying his next album is going to take on a hugely traditional route using traditional instrumentation.
Well, good.
So, I mean, I think that it would be a benefit to us in our genre if somebody, as well as a George Strait, but somebody like Post Malone
he's a big artist, but and you're right. I mean, crossover music is not going to hurt if it's good,
right.
But there are plenty of existing traditional artists that would make this category and a radio format and fill up those awards and do everything that needs to be done if they just do it, So,
There's
yeah.
another aspect. There's baby boomers that are still out there, and they like the traditional. But now we have the young
Thank
people.
you for recognizing that.
We have the young people. Well, I'm one of them.
Well, yeah.
We have the young people coming up. I live with 2 teenagers, and guess what they're listening to? The more traditional, Zach Top, Cody Johnson.
Yeah, the new generation needs their own superstars. I mean, I love that George Strait can draw that. He's phenomenal, and he should. But it's the next generation, probably 2 or 3 of them at this point.
Yes.
But the young kids need their own
together,
superstars.
That's a lot of listeners.
Yes.
A lot.
And like I said, those songs would go to the top of the charts. You're writing with, we all want to write with young artists because that's our best shot at getting a cut. And having artists willingly wanting to do traditional country music is great. And knowing it's actually going to go on a radio and it's actually going to win an award and it's actually going to chart, all 3 of those things start happening. Man, that's what, we've been praying and dreaming for a long time. So, yeah, this is
traditional
phenomenal.
music. I mean, the music, of course, but it comes back to the song. Which
the song will
comes
matter
back
more.
to you guys.
Yeah, the song matters
matters.
more than the production, because that's the thing about pop stuff. It's really about the production, and traditional is really more about lyrics and the melody, and and the production at that level. But the production is not getting in the way of the song. The song is it. We demo things, acoustic guitar vocals, piano vocals, because the song should be able to deliver the message. It's not just about the dance beat and the rhythm and a loop and somebody said something I didn't really hear what they said.
Is the Grammys protected from the AI revolution of song creation? Because I was talking to one of my engineers today, one of my studio owners, and he said that the metadata that's on a song that comes off of AI, you can tell it's AI. Got that on. The creator is AI, whatever that's. But if you take that AI track, put it into your studio software, and recreate it, take out stuff, add stuff in, you lose that metadata. You create a new song, but it's still AI.
So what they're doing is keeping some of the AI tracks and then recording live real tracks and then calling it real. Well, we talk about AI here all the time. Colin, I want to get your opinion on it too. I mean, I think that AI is a very valuable tool for songwriters to create demos. I don't believe it has any business being on the radio, or it has any business being as a record.
To see how they fit.
But yeah, I mean, it's an affordable tool for us as songwriters to be able to, here's how something's going to sound, or somebody says, okay, you did a male version of that. Can you give me a female version of that?
Yep.
Yes, in 5 seconds. So that's wonderful, and I think that it's a great tool for that. But I want to fight against it ever being on the radio or being sold as a finished product or anything like that, because and it darn sure I don't want to see AI awards, or anything else. So how do you feel about that, Kyle?
NASCAR race.
I didn't give you much room after that, but how do you feel about it?
Well, yeah. So obviously, I'm for real live humans playing real live music and being written by real live humans, and the emotion that comes through that. And I actually think that the Grammys traditional country album category, and generally speaking, the idea of like, hey, let's make and let's do this throughout the industry is an indemnity against AI because. When you have more contemporary sounds, when you have people using auto tune and drum machines and drum loops and these kinds of already electronic, when you go into a studio and the first thing that the creator does is open up their laptop and so, okay, let's get started, as opposed to like setting up microphones on a drum set. The potential for AI to encroach in that into that process is greater if you're composing music on a laptop than it is if you're composing music by bringing in guitar amps. And if you have, what I always say is it's human fingers impressing, it's wood and wire. In fact, it says, if you read the category description the Grammys did for the traditional country album category, it emphasizes for traditional country that there's things like live drums, that it's live instrumentation, it's traditional instrumentation. And so I think that if we can separate country music that's made by humans and have that be something that's special, because hey, I would love to stop the AI revolution in its tracks. That's not going to happen. It's coming. It's coming for all of us. I'm a journalist. It's going to take my job. It's songwriters. All of us are under threat. But what we can do is we can say, hey, there's something special about a human feeling emotions, writing those emotions down into a song, building a melody around it, and then live humans going into a studio, playing into microphones and recording that. Like there's something special. There's something unique to that. And sure, AI can do all these amazing things with, rearranging ones and zeros and digital this and digital that. But this is something different. This is traditional country. And traditional country has always been about paying homage to the past, about doing things that have a distinctly human connection to them. That's what's different between traditional country and contemporary country. And so if we lay out and if we create these avenues, charts, radio programs that that cater to this kind of music, then we can hopefully insulate ourselves from the ills of AI. And I also agree that it can be used as a tool, just like auto-tune can be used as a tool. Someone has a great studio performance, but one little note is slightly off. Well, then you use auto-tune, you tune that up a little bit, and it's okay, and everyone sees it is okay. Now you have quote unquote country artists that are they're singing straight up auto-tune, like their entire vocal signal is just run through an auto-tuner. You can call that contemporary country if you want. That's not country. That's not traditional country, at least not in my eyes.
Yeah, I agree. It's we've all got our jokes about how much auto tuning needs to be done on some people. But that is also why people do still go to concerts, because they do expect to see the people actually play the music, and again, I hate when there's tracks being played at a concert, or, it's like one of these days we're going to walk in and it's going to be a hologram of a band and they're just playing the AI version of it. And why, so we have to fight that.
In the 80s, one live drum kit I heard in the 80s. It's all drum machine. Everything was drum machine.
Pretty
Everything
much.
was MIDI.
Yeah.
We've been using AI for 20, 25 years.
And
we don't have real horns when you play it on the.
They've all been MIDI stuff on a whole bunch of stuff.
I don't get the big deal about not monetizing AI or using it. I don't understand. What's the difference between if you're writing a song, you write the melody, and you use AI to produce it because you're not going to use a real live band for a change. And myself, I've put hundreds of thousands of dollars into my career and other people. If I can monetize AI, why not? What difference is it going to make in a long term?
That's, I mean, it's true. I mean, it's the slippery slope aspect of anything. I mean, there have been MIDIs and drum machines and a lot of things for a long time.
All it's done now is it's easier and you get immediate feedback.
But as long as the writer wrote the song, you know, and that's a really, it's a really bad thing when, you know, a lyricist sends lyrics in and then AI writes the melody. I mean, I don't count that, and I don't want to count that.
Right. I actually called a writer friend out on it the other day. I had heard him say several times where he was considering himself a composer as well because AI was composing.
Because AI wrote. No.
I said it straight the other day. I said, honey, you're a lyricist. Period. You can't call yourself a writer unless you use words and learn how to,
at least the melody. I don't care. Yeah. You know, I can't play an instrument, but I can write the melody. I can sing it to the guy who can. You know. Yeah, I mean,
perfect, but you can hear
I love all that. I mean, one of the other benefits too of traditional country getting back to where it needs to be and sustaining its own life is that you get the different styles of music. I mean, I'm not a musician, but I do have a dance background, and I'm really looking forward to being able to have some two-steps and some swings and some waltzes and some things like that we should be writing music to, you know? I mean, I purposely have written songs that I wanted this to be a perfect two-step, or I wanted this to be a perfect, you know, swing or a shuffle or something. And getting traditional music back brings those kind of things back into the music format too. So that I think that, I mean, I know there have been various dance crazes and the line dance crazes and stuff, you know, and you talk about Brooks and Dunn and all that. I mean, you know, that made a lot of people an awful lot of money because there's an awful lot of dances were created for songs. And I love that. I mean, you know, that's been missing for a long time. And this opens the door for a lot of that too, I think. So I think a lot of bars ought to be happy when we get some of that going. So can't wait to write another two-step, can you?
Right. And a sweet art on it.
Oh, there you go. I do remember that one, yeah. So anyway, anybody else got any thoughts? Any other opinions? I know, Kyle, you had to leave. I don't want to hold you up too long. So.
Sure. Well, I do think you made a really good point about the charting situation, because I think we all know, like looking at it from a songwriting perspective, you know, when you have a chart, it creates an incentive for people, you know, for the labels, for artists and everything. Like, you know, people, you know, you go back and forth about like making music a competition, and that gets back to the awards and like who's charting where on the charts and all this stuff. But humans are just naturally, you make a chart, people want to be on there. So it's like if your chart is only paying attention to contemporary country music, that's what you're going to get. You know, that's what the labels, that's what the studios. So a lot of the producers are going to cater the music to. If you had a traditional country chart and you had it, whether it was for radio or just sort of an aggregated chart like Billboard does, they've got the radio chart, but they've also got the hot one, the Billboard, the Country 100 or whatever it is. You know, I think people would make more traditional country. I think the people that are trying to plug those songs, trying to get those cuts, they'd have more avenues open up, because all of a sudden you have a whole other chart that you can populate with those songs. And that's kind of the hope with the traditional country Grammy. It's like, no matter what else happens, this is 5 more nominations, and this is another award for a country artist. And, you know, maybe Post Malone is the guy. Like, if he wants to make a straight traditional country record, and if you listen to his first record, there's some of that on there. Like he, you know, like it was surprising, especially like on the last half, he had like a deluxe edition. There were like some straight up traditional country songs on there. So if he wanted to make a traditional country album, I don't think the Grammys are going to, you know, the Grammys have a whole system where they decide where things go. People submit their albums to the Grammys, but then they have committees that screen this stuff, and they will move things back and forth between different categories. So like, you know, if Post Malone makes a traditional country album, excellent, and that may inspire, other country artists to make more traditional country albums. And then all of a sudden, these avenues open up for songwriters, and it also opens up for musicians, steel guitar players, drummers, banjo players, everybody. Like it just opens up more opportunities for everybody. And I do need to go here, but I can stick around for a couple more minutes.
Right. What you just said there about, maybe they'll write more, and something that Paul said earlier, and I don't remember what the artist that you mentioned, where part of the album was traditional country, part of it was pop contemporary country. Are they just doing the pop contemporary because they want to get noticed? Because they know they won't get noticed?
Well, I suppose there's a combination of everything. You'd have to ask anybody. Luke Combs was one I mentioned because he's already done that. But yeah, I think that obviously that's the whole point. I mean, it becomes, like I said, 48 hours a day worth of country music. Some of it's this kind and some of it's that kind. And people will potentially focus on some of one or some of the other. So, I mean, good. I mean, if it's good music, that's really all we want, But we just want that good music also. And stop this either or argument, that's been going on.
Right.
I mean, because that's not accomplishing anything except, like Kyle said, just making people mad. That doesn't help either. So there's room for both. There's music for both. There's artists for both. There's money for both. There's radio stations for both. I mean, if you look at this in a business standpoint, you look at a town half the size of Nashville. You look at a town like Chattanooga or something, probably has 2 country radio stations competing with each other, playing the exact same songs. Well, number 2 tries harder, right? So number 2 should switch to the traditional market. And if that could happen in virtually every town, and then that's really what's going to make it work. And that's, guys, where we get paid, right? We don't get paid on any of these other formats. And all that does is open up that many more doors. And like I said, I view it as an end zone. If there's an end zone down there we can go score in, then let's play and go score, right? So producers will produce those songs and the artists will want to do it. And then you have artists that you'd mentioned people on the shelf, people like Mo Pitney and Easton Corbin and guys like that have been waiting and wanting. And boom, man, the hounds are released, right? So.
This category is a push towards focusing back on the art instead of the music, like we talked about.
Yeah.
Because, that has dominated radio. And I felt that as an artist, I'm original, but as a songwriter, I felt, I need to pander a little bit more if I want to have a hit. And so now we bring the focus back to art. There's a reason it's music business. Music comes first.
Yeah, it's an art and it's a business. I agree.
Yeah, there's a local female country artist that writes and talks traditional country music. She's going to start putting out an album pop country because that's the only way she's getting noticed.
That's the only way. Yeah, exactly. Kyle, before you leave, how can these folks get a hold of you? All the things that you do. I've followed you and read your reviews, and they're wonderful. And you've turned me on to some amazing music.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah. So savingcountrymusic.com is the website. And, if someone wants to get in touch with me, there's you'll find the contact button in the menu there. Feel free to reach out with an email. And like I said, I feel like this Grammy process or the new Traditional Country Grammy Award, this is just the start. But I think we also need to make sure that we follow through with this. So just once again, I would tell everybody, make sure if you have a traditional country album or a traditional country song, make sure that gets submitted to the Grammys. So the eligibility period is August 31st, 2024 to August 30th, 2025. So that's going to be the eligibility period for this upcoming Grammy cycle. And then the entry period starts on July 16th. So around probably right before July 16th, I'm going to be pounding pavement and trying to talk to as many traditional country artists and their representatives, their publicists, their labels, whoever, and say, please, please submit to this category. Because what we don't want to happen is they take this category away and then we lose all this momentum. But
yes.
If this Grammy category does really well, I really think that's going to give us the ammunition to then approach the CMAs, approach the ACMs, approach Billboard, and talk to these, because I think probably the hardest thing is going to be the radio aspect. Like, I think you're going to have to sort of like build it, and they will come with radio, because radio has just been so stodgy on this issue. And I really don't know why, because I agree, Paul, like there's a financial incentive here for them. In a lot of these stations now, they have sister stations. There's now, since a lot of radio is done digitally, they have like digital radio, like they'll have a 0.2 radio that you can tune into, and that could be the traditional country station. So like you turn into the pop, like you have the contemporary country format, then you have the traditional country format is like HD2. I'm not 100% boned up on my nomenclature there, so but I know that there's these HD channels that are available now that you could put on that and like test it out and see how it does. And then if you have enough of those channels, then you reach out to Billboard and say, hey, Billboard, why are you not charting this stuff? This is a viable format. And I think if we build this up, it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of building blocks. But if we really engage with this process, and that's one of the things that I found trying to do this, and probably one of the reasons this took so long, is because there's a lot of frustration in the traditional country in the traditional country community with these institutions, with the Grammys, with the CMAs, with the ACMs, with radio, with Billboard. And I get it. I've been doing this since 2008. The whole reason I started my website is because I was so frustrated that traditional country artists and artists that were not signed to big Nashville major labels were not getting the attention they deserved. So I was like, I'm going to do something. I'm going to build a website and do something about it. But so you have to build it up over time. It's not something, we can be distrusting of these institutions, but unfortunately, they're the ones with the cards. But what we can do is we can, politely, but passionately and assertively say, hey, let's do this. This is a real viable part of the marketplace that you guys are overlooking, and talk about the financial incentives they have into this. And it could start with like just an individual local radio station. And or just, now that we got the Grammys on board, let's next go to the CMAs. Then once we get the CMAs, the ACMs will fall in, and just build it up one at a time, and try to build these institutions up where they're representing all of country music, not just the top 40 popular people.
Yeah, and there's just so much music, and one of the phrases you all have heard me use is a rising tide lifts all boats. So all of us together help. It's not a competition. It's not anything. I mean, we all have to pull on this rope, to pull on it hard enough to make it happen. And I'm a songwriter. I like metaphors.
Terrestrial over-the-air radio stations know how many listeners they have?
Well, Arbitron ratings are what that gauges, and this is not. People have asked me, said, "Well, all you're going to do is split the pie, into half." I said, "No, you're not. You're going to make the pie bigger, because the people who would listen to this radio station, in many cases, aren't listening to any radio stations right now, and this brings people back to radio, as well as." There'll be some people who are listening to one station will maybe go bounce back and forth. The commercials are on this one, I'm going to go to the other one. Okay. Well, we all do that with radio. We've always done that with radio. But this will bring people that are listening to talk radio and other things, because there's no music on there that they want to hear.
But how is it measured? How do they measure their?
Well, that's what the Arbitron ratings are for. Is just they just do polls. Have you ever been polled before?
No, never.
Okay, I've only been polled once, I believe, in my whole life that I remember. But what radio station do you listen to? And they send those out, and that's how they determine those sort of positions, who's the number one station. Most of the number one stations in most of the formats in most towns are classic rock. I mean, that tends to still draw the biggest listeners, but again, that's what we're here for. I've approached it from the songwriter standpoint, and to me, the songwriter standpoint is radio. But I mean, Kyle, you're absolutely right. You're breaking new artists, and you're promoting new artists, and you're getting these new artists great attention that they wouldn't be getting otherwise, and the Grammys are going to recognize those with awards, and it should all follow. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, guys, and this has been a super riveting discussion. And I'm glad to get your perspective too from the songwriter's standpoint, because it's so important, man. Songwriters are like, this is where it all starts. It starts with an idea, right? And once it gets to the very top, but it all has to start with a song. And so if we're not supporting songwriters, we're not going to get that next great song that speaks to us. So thank you so much for what you guys do as an organization.
All right. Thank you, Kyle.
I'd like to hear from you again soon.
All right. Talk to you later, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
What else you got, Danny? I mean, same thing. I mean, this is going to benefit all of us in any way possible, and how much we can push.
I agree. There's just so many songs. Like, you think about when the song was pitched to Blake Shelton and Miranda was sitting there listening, The House That Built Me.
Oh, right.
Now, what we're talking about here are those kind of songs, like A Boy Named Sue. I heard it the other day, and I don't know, with a little age, I went back and listened to it, and it's so damn good. And there was so many great Christopherson songs, and it just digging deep for those songs, and those are the ones that, like we were talking about Bill Anderson. How simple can you get? I remember turning, putting that 78 on a little later, but, and listening to Once a Day, every day, all day long. Just simple, but it just moves you, and we're missing a lot of that.
So much. I mean, we can go back to, a couple of people that I've talked to want to help in a big way. Like, if you go to the TSAI website and you scroll through that gallery there, John Michael Montgomery and Heidi Newfield have both told me they want to help do the chart countdowns. So if we can get this to where there's actual radio format of people submitting the new songs, you still got to do that chart. Who's number 10? Who's number 9? Who's number 1? Right on that, and be part of those kind of things. But it's got to happen first, and those are pretty cool people, and there'll be more. There'll be a lot more. Speaking of John Michael, have you guys remember the little girl?
Yeah.
Song?
Harley Allen.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
I mean, don't want to make you cry. Those things make me cry. That's music, and it's why we're writers. I didn't write to give somebody a loop to dance to. I mean, I want to give them a 2-step to dance to, and a swing, and a waltz, and some of that. But man, we know we're writing this stuff. We pitch it all the time. We have guests leave these pitch meetings going, "This is so much better than I thought it was going to be." People walking out of here with 25 pickups from a pitch night. I mean, when do you go to a pitch night, somebody leaves with 25 pickups? Used to be one was a good night, right? So we know we're writing them. We just need the artist to cut them, and we need it to have a place to go. And we need the pluggers to know that it has a place to go, and the publishers to do that. That's what helps us. Is, like I said, as long as there's an end zone over there all of a sudden, then we can all try to score in it. And the Grammys just created an end zone.
Multiple publishers lately have come out and say, like Circle I'm in have said, we're looking for 90s traditional country with contemporary lyrics. So they know it's moving that way.
They know there's a market, and even without it being radio, they know there's a market. But once it's radio, we get paid again. Mm-hmm. So that's it.
The majors. And those are people like Sony, with Demolition, like people are pitching the majors. So it's coming around. It's exciting.
I'm excited. You excited?
Absolutely.
I'm excited. Anything else, guys? Because we're still on our Facebook page. I mean, Kyle had to leave, but we're still on. So.
We can.
Mark, what do you think?
I feel a lot better.
Good. I'm glad. Okay.
All right. Ready to go?
I think. Well, if that's it, guys. Thank you all for joining us. I know there's some questions here, but I don't have my glasses on. I can't read.
They're just comments.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed it. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Danny.